This week, Eddy Bobritsky from Minerva Labs joins us for our feature interview for the show today. In our startup stories of the week, I guess is more appropriate. We have startup stories and we have startup news. So in the stories, why 2017 is going to be a hell of a tough year for seed startups. You know your product team is failing, but do you know why? Startup investors fret over risks of mass data collection, the MVP you probably never heard of, and your 90-day plan to become an entrepreneur. We've got some news from some startups, GFI, Turbonomic, Cybellum, and Sentinel-1, as well as updates on our journeys. All that and more on this edition of Startup Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production.
From the top.
Brought to you by Tenable Network Security, creators of Nessus, the world's best vulnerability scanner. Jumpstart your security program today and evaluate Security Center CV, the continuous security monitoring solution. For more information, visit them on the web at tenable.com. IT Pro TV, an easy, entertaining approach to online IT training. Access over 2,000 hours of up-to-date, high-quality video content live and on demand via Chromecast, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, PC, or your mobile device. IT Pro TV's premium membership grants access to all courses, transcripts, virtual machine labs, and transcender practice exams. Corporate and group pricing are available. For a free 7-day trial and 30% off the life of your account, visit itpro.tv/startup security and use the code SS30. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending these assets? Have you penetration tested them? Start 2017 by taking a proactive approach to your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to see how they can help you sleep better at night.
Welcome to Startup Security Weekly. This is episode 24, and the date is, I should know this, Friday, January 27th, 2017. Welcome, everyone, to the show. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island and on the beach in South Carolina. Looking good and sounding better than ever, Mr. Michael Santarcangelo. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Those clarity upgrades, right? Looking... I don't know if everybody else would agree looking good. I might have a face built for radio, but this is what we get, and I'm excited about it. Another week of helping startups think about security, helping security think about business. It's a good week.
It's been a long week here in the studio. It was one of those weeks. Well, I guess it's not different from any other week where like nothing wanted to work. So we'll be drinking heavily later as a result of our week. Couple of quick announcements before we get started on the show. IT Pro has updated some courses in Cybersecurity Analyst Plus, CCNA Cyber Ops, and ITIL Operations Support and Analysis. All current premium members will be granted the highest level available as of February 1st. So make sure you visit itpro.tv/startup security. I think that's what it was. Whatever it said in the beginning, go do that. InfoSec, there's a couple of conferences coming up, Michael. You and I will both be at InfoSec World. The 10% off discount code is OS17-SW, and that conference is happening I'm sorry, I don't have the right notes in front of me. April 3rd through the 5th, is that right?
Yep.
InfosecWorld.misty.com, MISTI. And again, your discount code for that conference is OS17-SW. So make sure you sign up. Lots of great presentations, training. Michael and I will be there. I will be presenting my Kung Fu security talk. Everything I need to know about security.
I can't wait to see it. Yeah, that's gonna be a blast. I'm actually hosting the leadership workshop. So it's the day before. It's the CISO leadership stuff. And we've got a guest speaker. He's going to come in. He's going to talk about startup thoughts and startup mentality and how to incorporate that. And we're going to go into everything else. A lot of the stuff we talk about on the show, we're going to to be there. And then, we'll probably have some sort of an informal gathering, I suspect.
Yes, definitely. Another conference that we're working closely with is Source Boston. And the dates for that are different. I apologize. I don't have the right notes in front of me. Source Conference. The website is coming up. The training is April 24th through the 25th. The conference is April 26th through the 27th. This one's in Boston. InfoSec World is in Orlando. But we do have a discount code for Source Boston where there'll be lots of fabulous talks. The discount code is Security Weekly. You get $100 off either the conference ticket or one of the trainings, which is fantastic. The early bird prices are currently in effect. So do it while the cheapest prices are in effect now, and you get $100 off that price. You can go to sourceconference.com. I am submitting 3 different talks to the Source Conference as well as B-Sides Boston. Hopefully one of those gets accepted to both conferences, maybe a different one kind of thing going on, because they're back-to-back in Boston, and we'll be at both, which will be awesome. We'll have stickers, and this just in, we are going to have challenge coins for the first time ever.
Right on.
In Security Weekly history. So you want to make sure you check us out at those conferences. I do have, the last one is an event called Shaves That Save. And it's kind of funny, Michael, because you and I are both bald, but apparently there are people in security that do have hair, and they'll be going to this event and they'll be shaving their heads in support of charity. That's charity awesome. Is not in my notes.
St. Baldrick's.
Thank you, St. Baldrick's, funding children's cancer research. That's happening Wednesday of RSA, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.
That's awesome. That's really awesome.
They do have a website, and the link to that is in the show notes at wiki.securityweekly.com. So make sure you do that. It supports a good cause if you're attending RSA. That's an awesome event. So with that, Michael, I'll turn it over to you to introduce our feature interview for the show.
Yeah, I'm excited. We got Eddy Bobritsky with us. He's from Minerva Labs. This is something that got introduced to me over the summer, and it's one of those things that I like because he got introduced by a friend who said, "Hey, you got to go check this out." Eddy and I got on the phone, had a fantastic conversation, and since then, he's been able to successfully negotiate a Series A. He's talked to a couple other people that I've introduced him to in the industry that really enjoy the stuff that he's doing, and he's going to be the subject of a future Point of View article coming up on CSO Online in my column, Translating Security Value, and he's got some pretty interesting stances around how to look at traditional antivirus. And in the world of security and looking at startups, should we focus on next generation stuff, or are we maybe putting the cart before the horse? So lots of stuff I think for us to talk about here today. Eddy, welcome to Startup Security Weekly.
Hi guys, thank you for having me. Great pleasure, and I'm honored to be on the show. Thank you.
Well, and at the risk of us putting it, so always love to talk about your background. We've got some of it here on our show notes. Of course, people can come read it. Help us understand how you started Minerva Labs. What's the problem that you solve, and how did you get started with it?
So Minerva is environment simulation technology. We actually simulate on each and every endpoint existence of security and forensics tools. So actually by doing that, we're creating an environment that actually scare the malware and what actually make the malware refrain from execution. Right? So today attackers are smart and using a lot of evasion techniques and anti-reverse engineering techniques. The idea is simple: to bypass security barriers and to not to be detected or reverse engineered. So the malware actually launch a legitimate code before the execution of the malware to identify the environment. And this is how they bypass, for example, sandboxes. So Minerva make any endpoint look like a sandbox. So once they reach the endpoint protected by Minerva, they believe they're still in a sandbox, so they actually will not execute. And of course, because Minerva is the one who answering the queries of the malware, we know the exact location of the file and the malicious file. And by doing that, we're actually shifting the paradigm completely. We actually prevent the execution of the malware without the need for prior detection or any prior knowledge. We're not chasing malwares. We're waiting them to come to us.
You know, it's interesting, Eddy. It reminds me of something Ed Scotus told me many, many years ago, and it really resonated with me. And obviously, the devil's in the details. But he said, you know, when we were talking about rootkits, and he was like, the best way to protect against a rootkit is to already have a rootkit on the system. And it sounds like that's exactly what you've done.
Right.
And obviously there's a lot of intricate details in there that maybe reserve themselves for a more technical discussion on one of our other shows. But I think that it's a fantastic approach. My question, somewhat technical, is what percentage of malware have you found that actually does this kind of checking versus ones that don't?
So you have many studies about evasive malware and reverse engineering malwares. You have one very famous by Qualys, the one where tested 12 million samples of malwares that have been used in targeted attacks, and they found out that 90%, 89% of them using evasion techniques and anti-reverse engineering techniques. But without any research, just think about it, that the entire industry is based on the approach of detection and response. When I'm saying detection and response, I'm actually meaning that, for example, a firewall decide if to drop the packet or not based on the policy, right? So you detect the packet, and then you decide what to do. So detection and response. Once using detection and response, all the attacker have to do is to buy the product, understand how you're doing detection, and then easily evade. So there's many attacks that using such techniques. By the way, all the waves of ransomware that targeting enterprises using evasion techniques, because once you target enterprise with a ransomware, the idea is the stealthier you are, the more you can encrypt, the higher the percentage to get a ransom, right?
That makes sense.
So, yeah. So this is the beauty, by the way, about Minerva. It truly makes sense in a simple way.
Yeah. So what was the message to investors? Obviously, you've explained it to Michael and our listeners. You know, we get it. We're security people. What was it like taking that message to investors, and how did you frame that discussion in a very short manner, right? We spent a couple of minutes talking about it. You've got your Series A funding, so I imagine you have a really awesome way of explaining that, right, to somewhat non-security professionals, right?
So first, we got our Series A, and we are happy. I'm kind of like already forget about it, because as you mentioned before at the starting of the show, that now you have the money, now what, right? Right. It's the money time. As an Israeli startup based in Israel that wants to penetrate the US market, the biggest security market, it was very important for me to raise the money from US-based VC. And this process is not short, because first you have to understand what actually the investor want to see, right? I can tell you that in very high level, right, the idea of Minerva is pretty much simple. The execution is tricky, and been like around 2.5 years in stealth mode, and we're doing it in a very unique way. And like, so once something is simple, first, everybody trying to put you in the bucket. So you're antivirus? No, I'm not, because I'm not detecting stuff. I'm not replacing antivirus, actually. I'm like a prevention layer. So, and then it's like, okay, so you kind of deception. Oh, no, I'm not deception. I am deceiving the malware, but I'm not a honeypot. Traditional honeypot, they're trying to encourage the attacker to attack, right, or trying to deceive the attacker in the last phase. We're actually doing it in a much earlier stage, before the installation phase, when actually there is no man behind the malware, right? Because the attacker waiting the malware to be installed and reconnected back. And this is exactly where we intercept the malware, and this is why it's so powerful. So to explain who you are and what you are is very tricky, because especially in crowded space like security, it's funny, but from what I see, most of the investors are looking for something they already know, right? So if I was coming to them that I have AI and next generation AV, whatever, right? So probably I believe it would be easier to raise money. But once you have to explain, because as I just told you, the short pitch, right, about Minerva, you can, like, you're a security guy, so you understand the potential of this approach. But for investor or for anybody else, it can be a feature, right? Oh, you're just a feature. You can be like a feature in an antivirus or something. So actually, it's not a feature. It's a platform, and we're building a lot of modules on top of it, from simulating security and forensics products through protecting memory space and protecting end-to-end solution for ransomware problem. And also, you just mentioned that 20 years ago, right, we have a term called vaccination, right? When we put the infection marks inside your computer, so the malware will believe that it's already infected and then will do nothing. So we do have such technology as well. And the most interesting thing is that also we can integrate with the existing security solution and share our intelligence, because the nature of the product of Minerva is that you actually can, because we're not detecting, the very big amount of attacks that we stop are unknown. Okay, you upload to VirusTotal, unknown for a few days. Sometimes I think the longest time was like 2 weeks, and it makes sense because of the approach, right? So actually, can
Eddy,
catch down.
a technical question along those lines, which I think is really exciting. So when you detect that something has tried to basically detect if it's running inside of a sandbox, you can grab a sample of that and you save those samples off?
I'm actually not saving. I'm using APIs to connect to other security solutions that we already have. Think about it, right? One of the biggest problems in security is that we really have great tools, but no one uses the full power of the tool because we have to be business enabled, right? So if you take, for example, antivirus and you run 10 samples of malware in quick scan and full scan, the results are different, right? So what Minerva does, once we prevent the attack, we're actually using APIs and send it back for deep and high priority inspection. We're using the full power of the tool on this specific file. By doing that, we're increasing the detection rate and effectiveness of the existing security solutions. So actually, for each dollar you already spent on security, you get more. Okay, and as Michael mentioned, I have a real belief that we have great tools that you can do more with these tools and actually to make them work better. I really believe that the future in cybersecurity is rely in pure prevention like we do, like without the need for prior detection, and automation. And the reason is that we have more and more devices connected to the network, more and more alerts generated, and less human resources. And Gartner believed that by 2020 we'll miss 1.5 million people in security arena. So if you can prevent attacks without the need for prior detection, without chasing them, and if you can automate processes, it's must-have abilities in every organization, small, big, whatever.
I love this. I think it's fantastic. It conjures up a lot of questions and a lot of directions we could go. I've been focusing somewhat on the technical aspect because I'm a nerd and that's what I do. But you said something very telling, and I think that my opinion is the landscape is changing, that there are new security startups such as yourselves that I think kind of do a couple things different. Like, number one, it's a whole new market, or it's a whole new subset of a market, right? It's in endpoint protection, right? But there's a new subset, a new way to solve the problem. So let's start there. How has that been challenging for you, and how have you overcome some of the challenges that are inevitable when you say, well, we solve the problem in a different way? Like, in other words, there's not companies lining up saying, I want something that's going to, mimic a sandbox and detect ransomware on my network. They're not saying that yet because they don't know it exists. So how have you kind of overcome that challenge?
So I think it's a great question, and I think it can also give some, spotlight on raising money. I think one of the biggest challenges in endpoint security is, of course, the yet another agent phenomena, right? Kind of like you have never-ending amount of agents. But actually, the reason that it is a problem because a lot of companies solving very narrow problem, and eventually, after 2-3 years of running, they have this bottleneck and they cannot grow up, right? You cannot do more things. So, and these two aspects, one is I call it IT-wise, right? Like performance and footprint on the endpoint. And the second one is to be a platform, to be able to grow, to be able to innovate, to be able to go not only deeper with your product, but also wider. It's key things that the VC will look for, right? Because think about it, the VC, the general approach is that once he invests in you, he really believes that your company can return his entire fund. So they want to see the potential of growth, right? Or maybe a very quick win that's totally understandable, and so on and so forth.
Right.
So to overcome these challenges, so for example, I had great experience in system and especially endpoint security. And I remember that once we designed the solution from the very beginning, we said we wanted to be very different. We want to take all the disadvantages to make to our advantages. So, for example, we operating only in user space, not kernel level driver.
Interesting.
And I know that any hacker probably will say, oh, but if I have a driver, I can bypass you. Yes, you are, but how you decide where to install the malware, the driver? So you'll query the environment, and this is where I'll stop you. So it's very interesting, right? Mm-hmm. Because of the phase of the attack that we intercept, we actually can be in the user space. Being in the user space allows you to do very interesting things. For example, we have no requirements for reboot during installation, uninstallation, or upgrade. We support any distribution platform. We can write on top of McAfee, EPO, or Tenium. Right? It's very important for the IT, once you distribute agent, like to be kind of an agentless, right? Now, we're also passive solution, right? I'm not scanning. I'm waiting the malware to come to me. So once we're answering the query, our peak performance footprint is 0.03% CPU and 24 megabytes RAM. Okay? And this is really powerful. So all these challenges, by the way, no graphic interface to the end user. I don't know what, like, as an end user, what they said, okay, stop, the attack stopped, so what? Right?
That's a good point,
so
though. That's a good point.
Yeah, it depends. Like, there may be some things that you, like, let's say maybe with ransomware, you do want to pop up something, like I just protected you from ransomware, right? But the idea is to send everything to our server, management server, and this server is fully integrated with any SIEM solution. You can pull, you can push, do whatever you want. You actually can throw it away and not use it at all. It's up to you, because in IT, like in endpoint security, IT security can actually be the biggest challenge of the project. And I can tell you that we have customers with 6,000 and 7,000 endpoints where we distributed the solution, the agent, just in a few hours, and the entire network. Okay, so this is very...
what I hear you saying, Eddy, I think is fantastic advice for those of us in the startup world in security. And that is, it's okay to be very focused and solve a problem in a new way. However, you have to be super like user-friendly and easily deployable, and you got to play nice with others. And
that's right.
Those two things combined speaks to how you're going to grow the product from there and show investors that, yes, we solved this specific problem. However, we've got these growths. And I like how you said we can go deeper and we can go wider to expand out. And I think that is phenomenal advice. Now, my question is, how do you manage that growth and make the right decisions as to where you want to integrate, how much you want to integrate, and how much deeper you want to go?
So actually, I think for any startup, to be lean is like a Bible, right? In startups, right? You should not develop something that is not needed. Okay, I can give you one example. Like once you have an idea, you brainstorm and you have a lot of directions, right? The biggest mistakes is to go to all the directions. You have to understand what actually makes the biggest impact and what is the easiest penetration point to the organization, right? So I remember, for example, right, we simulate existence of security tools, right? So I can tell you that a year ago, there was a nice way to bypass, kind of understand that there is Minerva. You can ask if you're a sandbox, in FireEye sandbox, and then to ask if you're in Palo Alto sandbox. And then if the answer is yes in both cases, it's not possible to be in the same time in two sandboxes, right? Right. This is the example that we know at the beginning. We don't need to deal with it because nobody knows who's Minerva. And once we're going to grow, we have the solution. And we already implemented it, and it's called smart policy, right? No one not answer, right? And the future of it is dynamic policy, right? I will simulate different stuff all the time, shifting, right? And even if the attacker knows that Minerva there, it still be very challenging to understand. Actually, also today, this there is one question when always any startup been asked: what if the attacker buy your product and know how it works?
Yep.
So the answer is everybody will be bypassed, and there is no 100%. But we actually in Minerva always keep claiming this following thing, and it is like, again, because of the uniqueness of the approach, we actually don't care. Because if I'm as the attacker know that the Minerva there, and I know that 19% of the answers is a lie because they're simulated, yet I don't want to be reverse engineered because the police will come after me, right? So my malware reached the endpoint, query if there is forensics tool, but yes as an answer. But how it can know if I simulated that answer or it's a real tool? So actually, it cannot dispatch. Actually, it can, but you have to create a lot of noise, right? You can inject yourself to any process on the endpoint, but then the antivirus will stop you.
Oh, I see. So the process for determining if Minerva is running on the system will create a lot of noise and likely trigger some other alarms. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just to say, if you go back to like my concept all the time of friction, I just want to point out what I'm really enjoying about this conversation, Eddy, is that you've clearly come from some background on this, and I can tell listening to you, you've had these conversations and had to think them through. I want to highlight one thing that I really enjoy. You said, okay, we identified this potential problem. All right, let's think about solutions. Yep, cool. Do we need to do it now? No. Great. But now you're developing, your roadmap says, I might need to do those things at some point. So you've thought about it. That's fantastic. And you know now that there are certain steps that you can start to build in or put on your roadmap. And then the day that really becomes an issue, or a really important client says, oh, if you could just do X, yep, boom, here you go. Got the feature. Turn it on for you. Fantastic.
This what happened with the ransomware. This is what happened with the ransomware. We didn't have a solution for ransomware, but once the problem started to raise, and we heard more and more about it, and by the way, we prevent most of it. We said, listen, we can actually also, as I told you, the very basic way to bypass Minerva is to give up your greatest strength, to use evasion techniques. Yep. And then you easily bypass Minerva, right? By the way, perfect example why detection and response is usually too late, right? You detect ransomware only after you encrypt it, and then
yeah, too late.
There is a ransomware. Hello? Mm-hmm. So we actually managed, if you have Minerva and you've been hit by ransomware, it is not evasive, that Minerva didn't prevent it, and you've been encrypted, we alert you and you can restore the data. And again, we're doing it on the same platform, with the same solution, but with different module. And this is the beautiful thing, to always keep options on the table to growth, right? I can share with you one topic that we've been thinking about in the company. Right now we are only Windows based, right? By the way, we don't care what Windows you're running. We have single installation package for the entire Microsoft environment.
So Eddy, let me just ask you a question there, because I struggle to find solutions to recommend to folks that are running legacy unsupported Windows operating systems. You're laughing already. And that seems to me to be a gap in the market. So you say you run on Windows, does that include legacy and unsupported Windows operating systems?
Yeah. So because the nature of the product, we actually officially support for Windows XP, but we have a customer with few machines of Windows 2000. And we run with single agent. We don't care if it's 32 or 64-bit machine. I don't care if it's Windows XP 10, 7. If it's Windows Server, I don't care. Single agent. If it's a Windows embedded, I don't care. If it's a gas pump, point of sale. If it's a VDI, by the way, the end point of the VDI, the thin client, we can ride on top of it easily. So without, as I told you, the performance are ridiculous. The footprint is ridiculous. And this was very important, because VDI today, I can tell you that the big finance organizations in the United States, at least let's say 25% of the network or 20% of the network is VDI. And today they're protecting it by protecting the server itself. And we both understand, right? We all understand here that it's problematic. Because they cannot implement security solutions on the VDI itself. Performance is critical, and once you are kernel level solutions, and the idea of the VDI is to share hardware resources, it's like even a problem. And we understood immediately that we can ride on top of it. By the way, you mentioned something very interesting about startups and entrepreneurs. Sometimes you have an idea and you're saying, oh, I will not talk about it with no one, right? It's like, it's my secret. Nobody will steal it from me. So I can tell you that I kind of started with this approach, but I immediately pretty fast understood that the more you share, the more you have interesting questions, interesting challenges to overcome, to understand. Like, I can tell you the first question was how you detect that you prevented something. So I said, like, who cares? No, actually, you care. If you sell something, you have to show that you're still doing something, right? So it's like I was like, okay, we actually the one who answering the question, so we know where it is. Okay, cool, we have a solution. So you should speak with as much people as possible. Not waving the flags. I'm not saying like publish your idea in Kickstarter and try to understand what it is, but actually people you trust. People you trust that can connect you to other people with experience. It's very important to get a validation. And by the way, even negative response can always encourage you to to think in different way. And it's very important.
Eddy, let's focus on that for a second. So one of the things we talk about is traction. Okay, so you've operated in stealth mode for a while. You've come in. Now, obviously, you've got both of us excited for different reasons even. I like the fact that you're able to say, look, the way that we do prevention as an industry is really a packaged version of detection and response. And the reason I'm kind of harping on that is because I'm starting to also see this trend in the industry to say, guys, we got to do better detection and response, which I also agree with. So you're coming along and saying, I can do real prevention, so you've got to educate people on that. When you're going out trying to get traction, then, how much of your traction is re-educating people, or how much of it is it they're getting excited like Paul and I are, and they go, oh, this is great, where you been? But then what's that like for you in these enterprises to say, here, try it? What are you learning about getting traction by working with some of these folks?
So, great question. So there are people who are excited and they're early adopters and they're like security gurus and saying like, wow, like, how nobody did it before that, right? It's like, it's a simple approach, right? So, but by the way, I can tell you that you said like you've been in stealth mode, but before the stealth mode, I can tell you that I remember when I thought about this idea that I got from a commercial of SourceFire, true story, that I said, I'll do every day something that push this project forward, right? It can be even something really stupid like work on single slide of understanding what I'm trying to say in this slide. And one step at a time, and then you grow. And then you're going for potential customers, right? And you have people, as you mentioned, that are excited. So it's easy to get in. And again, by the way, there are a lot of companies in the industry that have a lot of CISOs that have this approach, this belief that, listen, I don't have too much budget. And if I believe in some technology, I want to get it early. I will give it for a low price or even for free, just for reference and to be a lab, right? And I'll be happy to be a design partner. I can tell you that today, 60% or even 70% of feature requirements are coming from our design partners, from customers, from different industries that we trust, that we believe that these CISOs understand these teams, good security teams, and it's very important, right? So
I want to pivot on that because Paul and I talk about this all the time. So you've got your customers, you're building good relationships, they trust you, you trust them, and they want feature requests. Part of that challenge has got to be how to decide it. Now, you said something interesting. So you've got different partners in different industries, different sizes, they're teams that you trust. So when they come to you and they want a feature request, are you looking for a trend? I'm not looking for hard and fast, like if 5 people request it, but like, how do you decide then, based on what comes in, when and how to tackle it, and then how are you talking with your customers about that growth?
So I can say in general that all the features are very interesting, and I think eventually must be in the product. But eventually you need to have a kind of a common sense, right? You know that, for example, you're developing one feature and then the customer requested something that is really nearby, right? It's like another day of development and you get it as well. So let's do it, right? Features that will help to show value and will help, like, I stopped an attack, and you can call it also coverage, and features that will help with the implementation, right? We'll make it easier, right?
Okay.
So
you
this
have
is key
that's an
things.
interesting priority that I hadn't considered. I just want to call it out because obviously Paul knows I love value. So if you're looking at it saying this feature increases value, this feature helps make it easier to implement. So you're looking at things that are going to ultimately make it not just solve a problem for current customers, but that are going to make it easier for other people to say yes. So
we have an example like this, right?
That's deceptively simple, but I like it.
No, so we have an example that I mentioned before, right? The smart policy, right? So, okay, it makes sense. It must be someday in the product, right? But does it help you with sales? No. The POC doesn't matter if you have this or not. Does it help you with implementation? Hell no, right? So it's like, let's put it aside. Let's do it once we have time.
Yeah, I often think that what you're talking about obviously is product management, and I think that can be a very difficult thing for startups. And Eddy, you seem to have mastered that. So,
by the way, this is an interesting point because I think entrepreneurs, especially once you have a team of founders, more than one founder, eventually once you're growing, one of the challenges is to let it go. Because you bring people on board, right? You bring them not to tell them what to do. You really want to hear their advice because you bring them, you trust their background and their knowledge to help the company. So I can tell you that the hardest thing to let go is the product, right? Because it's kind of your baby. You truly understand it upside down, and sometimes people come and say, like, "Oh, you know shit." Like, we know how it works exactly. And then usually you should stop and listen because sometimes they can raise an issue that can actually solve a big problem. And I can tell you that we about to announce our new VP of product, a guy that we really trust, and I admire him. For me, he's like security guru that I believe that can add a lot of value to our product strategy. And of course, strategic stuff we'll keep doing together, but eventually it's very important in startup to know to let go.
No, that's some good advice. So, Eddy, if people are interested in your product, and this is good advice for startups too, like how are you doing your demo trial process, right? That's a big conversation in a lot of startups, right? Especially in yours. You don't want to necessarily give it to the attackers. You won't want to give it to everyone, but there are benefits to giving it to everyone. So how have you managed that?
So one of the biggest challenges in security is that how you arrange the customer be attacked during your POC, right?
Yes, that's a good point.
By the way, we had the opportunity to stop real attacks during some POCs. I can tell you that a week later you have the PO, the customer paid for the product. Yep. It's the easiest thing, right? But actually, in the security arena, it's like, you show that you have this a qualification checklist, like whatever you decided, what is the process of prove the value. But we wanted and think about it, we kind of a tricky product. I'll give you a challenge, a real big challenge that we overcome during a POC because I said oh man, it's going to be hard. So we bring a product and then the customer download 50 malwares from virus total. And it tested on Minerva. We stopped 0. Because it's pure malware. It's already unpacked, right? It's nothing how you get it in the reality. It's probably detected by your antivirus. So it's it's a big challenge. So first, we managed to create some kind of sources to give malwares. But actually then we said, let's do it other way. So we went to the darknet and bought a tool for $300 called Timida. You probably know it's a very famous packer. And it's drag and drop tool. And then we're actually going to a customer and saying, listen, put few computers outside your network with your security systems, tools, whatever, fully updated, fully intrusive. And now let's take these 50 malwares that you stopped inside your organization, right, with your tools, and let's drag and drop inside the Timida tool. And then 5 minutes you have new packed malwares. And now none of the security solutions stop this because it's new packed malware that use evasion techniques. And then he tested on Minerva and you see that we stop everything. By the way, the more complex it is, the easier for us to stop.
Right.
So you have to show the value. You have to show the value. Another thing that we are doing, I told you that one of the advantages IT-wise that we are lightweight, right? So we wanted to tackle this advantage from two different points. We actually encourage customers to implement during the POC on the like how many endpoints that they want. We not limit them, right? Because then you can see that it's easy to deploy and manage, but actually increasing the chances that I will stop something because I'm covering more endpoints in your organization. So always to look for kind of win-win situations, and always to look like, always try to avoid stupid arguments. Like, you can you can argue with someone who is better semantic on McAfee like for 10 years. So it's like, it's not the point. Try to find your value, how you're really different, and what is your actual added value to the organization, right? So like, for me, Minerva is like for CISO. It's like, stop chasing, man. Stop replacing products. Statistically, the longer you have a product in your network, it will work better, even if you not use the full functionality, because you know the product. So you can operate events much faster. So keep your traditional security in place. We'll make it work better, and we'll give you the coverage that you're wishing for, right? Against attacks like Sony Pictures, Carbonac, and you name it. All the cyber attacks that reached the Wall Street Journal in the past 7 years, I can tell you, not except of DDoS attacks that are very noisy, all the others used evasion techniques or anti-reverse engineering techniques, and you can test it.
That's awesome.
I want to point out something I think is interesting, because one of the things that I love talking about with people when I'm on the other side of the equation is, anything you're looking at, I want you to be able to tell me what value it holds, but also, does it amplify the value of anything else you have in your current environment? And it's fascinating that I ask that, because a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't know." And then, because a lot of times when we talk about straight talk and we get to, so how are you going to communicate? People immediately jump right to, well, I'll say this or I'll say that. And I always say, well, hold on, stop. We're going to start at the structure of communication. How does this communication happen technically in your environment right now? And what kind of systems are you using to communicate? And then I always say, so go look at your APIs. Go look at the platforms you're using. If you're bringing something else in, does it connect? Does it communicate? Does it enhance? And I'm starting to see a trend where we're seeing more of that. And I think it's a really good trend in security. So if you're in a startup today, you got to be thinking about, how can I communicate with others? Either pull information from them so I'm better, and or push information to them so they're better, or some combination of the two, because that's how ultimately this industry is going to grow up and do better. So I love the fact that you built that into it from the jump, and I've seen a couple others that do that as well, and I like it. But then if you're on the other side of this equation, you've got to start asking that question: how does this fit with everything else I have? 20 years ago, guys, we asked this question. If I put that thing in, how does it work? Where does it fit? And if you couldn't answer it, they're like, okay, thanks, gotta go, bye, have a nice day. And then we kind of went through a phase where the compliance drumbeat and the interest of security swelled up the budgets, and we stopped asking that question. It was, buy it, put it in, let's go. But Eddy, as you just pointed out, and obviously we talked about it earlier this week, one of the questions I have, and I'm spending more time thinking about that, I don't have clean answers yet, but I think you need to understand how the stuff you have in your environment today is performing. And is it performing based on the spec that you expected it or not? And can you get better performance out of it or not? And so if you're going to put more stuff into the environment, you got to understand what you've got and how it's working and the problem you're trying to solve. And then you can layer other stuff into it, absolutely. But I'm kind of shocked how often people don't know how to answer those questions. And to be fair, a lot of them don't like when I ask the questions.
Yeah, so I can point one reason. I think, security market is market of fear, right? It's based on fear, and once it's based on fear, a lot of people are victims for marketing, heavy marketing publications and marketing in general. So it's like in healthcare insurance, right? So the idea is that once you're afraid of something and somebody is pushing very hard on marketing stuff to pump your head 24/7 with some buzzwords and phrases and so on and so forth, you kind of like, your boss asking you like, oh, why you don't implement this stuff, right? So you're saying like, it's not good enough. So why? How it's not good enough? I see it in every airport. I see it everywhere. I see it in any journal. I saw they stopped this and that, right? And then you create some kind of a pressure on the CISO that eventually his responsibility is always to show that he did the best to stop anything potential bad from happening to the organization. So this is very tricky equation. And this is what happens, right? One of my sales line or pitch lines, you name it. It's like, I don't have the tens of millions of dollars to put in marketing. I'm selling the simple truth. Let's go to the lab and test our products, right? This is the really thing that I'm selling. That's it. Like, let's put it in a lab and let's test it. So and it's very important.
How often does that work? I bet you that works great, actually. I mean, think about that.
Yeah,
I'm gonna steal that, Eddie. That's great.
I got nothing to sell you but the truth. Let's go to the lab.
Yeah,
there you go. I like it. I don't mean to give away all your secrets, but that's pretty solid.
Yeah, that's right. And by the way, another thing is that sometimes you really bought a cool product. But if you combine, as you mentioned, Michael, if you see anything that you can do already with your environment, the added value of the new product is not so high. And this also happens a lot. And then you have like a lot of Me Too solutions in same organization. I saw an organization that have like 3 or 4 AV vendors because somehow they decided it's a smart move. So this is the industry.
Well, Eddie, thank you very much for coming on Startup Security Weekly. This has been a very informative interview, helpful to Michael and myself and our listeners as well. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
A lot.
Thank you all, and thank you for having me. It's a great honor, and be in touch, guys. Enjoy. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Stay tuned. Startup news coming up next.